So I want to share a thought with you. First, let me just say about 1280. I love this station, and they know it. And I don't use the term loosely. This is a terrific station. They're terrific people. I'm honored that I was on from day one. And now that they no longer ask me to come in the middle of the summer to the state fair, I really love them. There is no station I have sacrificed as much for as this station. I can handle it when it's 0 here. You can always add another coat. But there's nothing you can do in August. So coming in October, you couldn't have been better. I mean, this is like perfect. This is your great 2 weeks. Is that correct? Charlie, you're here during the great 2 weeks. Yeah, no. Take it in, man. Take it in. They invite you in January. Where are you living now?
Scottsdale. It's a lot different. So.
Oh, God, Scottsdale. I want to share with you a thought, a very serious one now. In a very sad way, Minnesota opened my eyes to a very important thing. My eyes have been open in the last a year and a half to 2 years in dramatic ways, and I really did believe that I had a lot of things about life pretty clear. And yet I learned a tremendous amount in the last year and a half. I can spend the whole evening just saying that. We don't have that time. But let me tell you one that I learned from Minnesota. And it's a sad lesson. So I'm preparing you in advance. You know the saying, Minnesota nice. Minnesota nice exists. I've been here about 20, 25 times. And every time I'm struck by how nice people are here. It's just a fact. Yet, nice people vote scumbags into office. Sorry for the language, those of you who are religious like me, but I think God forgives me on that one, because there's no clean term for the awful human beings that you often elect. Truly awful, destructive, mean, bad people. Why do nice people elect bad people? There's a reason. I try to work everything through. That's my thing in life. I have to understand. I always say if I were on the Titanic, before asking where the lifeboats are, I would have asked, why did this happen? And as we were sinking, if it was being explained to me, I could understand. I can handle it. I don't want to drown without any understanding. I need clarity. So that's my nature. I'm very serious. That is my nature. I want to understand. So how has it happened that nice people have voted in such awful human beings, ruining their lives, ruining the lives of so many fellow Minnesotans? And here is the answer. I have the audacity to say I think I know the answer. And this became clear thanks to Minnesota and this past year. There was no connection between nice and wise. And I always sensed it, but I've never been able to put it into one sentence like I just did. Nice is nice and wise is wise, and goodness is not possible without wisdom. And I'll tell you where the wisdom part I learned earlier from my tradition, the Jewish tradition. So the Passover Seder, which many of you who are Christians even have often in your own church or with Jews, or both in your church with Jews, or in a synagogue, or in a Jewish home. And there's a very famous part of the liturgy of the Passover Seder called the 4 sons. And it actually comes from the Bible, about 4 sons. And the 4 sons are the bad son, the wise son, the son who does not know how to ask, and the simple son, which pretty much characterizes everybody. So you have to speak to each one. I can explain the Exodus, which is what the Seder is about, to each one in their own language. Even as a kid, however, I was struck there's no good son. There's a bad son, but there's no good son. And I did not understand why as a child, and nobody could explain it to me. It took me a long time to figure out that 2,000 years ago they understood There is no good son if there's no wise son. Wisdom is what is necessary for goodness to prevail. And that was reinforced in this last year. All these nice people. I have nice relatives, and I'm not being sarcastic. I don't have any unnice relatives, as it happens. And most of them voted for Joe Biden, which makes sense. They live in the Northeast and they're Jewish. A deathly combination. So their fascist relative, Dennis, whom many of them love, as it happens, and I love them. But anyway, they lack the wisdom to understand, and it's not an insult, not in the least, God forbid, to understand the damage that the Democratic Party and the left are doing to this country. And the importance of what I told you explains a term I did not believe in for 4 years, Trump derangement syndrome. I never used the term. It is accurate. I now use it. I do believe it exists. People became deranged on the issue of Donald Trump. And what deranged them was their association of niceness with wise and good. They don't think Trump is nice. By the way, I have no idea if he's nice or not, and I don't care. I couldn't care less if he's nice or not. As I said for 4 years, I said, what are you talking about? If any of you had to choose an oncologist for you or a loved one, would you ask if the person's nice? Of course not. Would you ask if he was faithful to his wife? No, you wouldn't. Would you take an adulterer who was a great surgeon or a pretty good surgeon who was faithful to his wife? You would all take the first, wouldn't you? By the way, God seems to have a warm spot for adulterers too. Just for the record, since a lot of you are religious, and as I am, and into the Bible, King David was not just an adulterer. He had the husband of the woman he slept with killed, which is much worse than Trump did. All right, just let you know, compared to King David, Trump is Saint Trump. And my all-time favorite is, who did God choose among the Canaanites to let the spies and the Israelites into the promised land? Did he choose a Canaanite accountant, a Canaanite judge, a Canaanite social worker? No, a Canaanite prostitute. Of all the people in Canaan, who did he choose? These are lessons to us. God's not pro-prostitution, but he knows when there are bigger issues to work on, you can't preoccupy yourself with those sins. We have bigger issues. The survival of America is bigger than whether Trump was in bed with a porn actress. I don't care. It's between him and his wife and God. I don't care. And the notion of, well, Dennis, what about a model to your children? So I think about that a lot. I thought, I don't remember my father ever saying, Dennis, I want you to look at Lyndon Johnson. There's a model, Dennis. Why did it ever occur to my parents or me to look to the president as my model? You know who I look to among male models? My dad, my uncles, my older brother, my rabbis, my teachers at religious school. President? Who looks to president as a moral model? And it's not even expected. That's not their task. It's a task of the rabbi, of the teacher, of the parent. Everything is wrong because we lack wisdom. So that's what I learned, and I was leading up to it my whole life, from the Passover Seder liturgy about the no good son but a wise son, and to Minnesota. That's how nice people, they lack wisdom. And so you know what? Nice people can do a hell of a lot of damage, and not nice people can do a hell of a lot of good. The human species is a complex species. So let me tell you about wisdom. One more thing, and then I know we have questions. Correct, Nick? Mm-hmm. Right. So I'll tell you something I learned. This I did learn. I wrote about this at least 25 years ago when Charlie was in third grade. And
I was 2.
he was 2. Oh, even better. Well, as it happens, he was the only 2-year-old in 3rd grade. He was extraordinary. He was an extraordinary child.
Gifted is the word.
Gifted. And not even better, he read my article. So I wrote this piece. You could see it on the internet, and it's titled "How I Found God at Columbia University," where I went to graduate school. And this is what happened. I often point out I've never had a theophany. God has never appeared to me directly. He appears to me in the Bible, but he's never appeared to me, Dennis. But I've had one epiphany, truly one. In other words, out of nowhere, so to speak, a revelation. I was very lonely. Well, no, not lonely. Thank God I've always had friends. But I was alone at Columbia. It was as bad then in its own way as it is. It's worse today. Today's a cesspool. Then it was just nonsense. And I kept asking, why are my teachers, all of whom were very bright? I was at the School of International Affairs. These professors were bright. And why am I learning nonsense? True nonsense. Like I was learning then men and women are basically the same. And I knew that was nonsense then. I was learning that the U.S. and the Soviet Union were moral equivalents. How's that? 2 superpowers struggling for power, not freedom versus tyranny. 2 superpowers. So I kept asking, why are such bright people teaching me nonsense? And out of nowhere, in Hebrew, because I studied until I was 18, I studied half the day in Hebrew, religious subjects, half the day in English, secular subjects. And in Hebrew, it came back to me, a phrase that we had said from the Bible. You'll recognize it as soon as I say it in English. And it was what I call an epiphany. It answered my question forever. Why is there so much nonsense at Columbia and every other university? And the phrase was, and I'll say it to you in Hebrew only so that you'll get the flavor of what happened. Reshit chokhmah yirat Adonai. Wisdom begins with fear of God. And I said, that's it. There's no wisdom at Columbia because there's no God at Columbia. And then I realized, and that became my life's mission, I started to realize all the problems emanate from the death of Judeo-Christian values in the West, including, most important, the death of wisdom. There is no wise secular institution. It does not exist. And the most secular institution, the university, is the dumbest. Only the secular could say men give birth. Only the secular could say America is systemically racist. And just go down the line. 53 genders and the like. Religious people who never went to college know this is nonsense. So that's the issue. Wisdom is the issue. And that's ultimately the issue is truly a religious issue in this country. Unfortunately, too many Christians and Jews are more afraid of Facebook than they are of God. And that is the tragedy of religious life in America. Secular life, it's a given. But too many are afraid who call themselves religious. But if there is any hope for the country, it will come from the religious communities. And they have to fight, and we'll certainly talk about that. Thank you very much.